The morning of their trip broke with a flawless blue sky, the kind of day every fisherman dreams about. The harbor was still waking when the siblings arrived, hauling coolers packed with bait, sandwiches, and cold drinks down the weathered dock. Their boat, a sturdy 30-foot vessel named Sea Glass, bobbed gently at its mooring, the hull gleaming from a fresh coat of paint applied just weeks earlier. They moved with the easy rhythm of people who had done this countless times before, speaking in half sentences and knowing glances as they loaded their gear. The older sibling, Mark, handled the boat like an extension of himself. Years of working charters in his 20s had given him a quiet confidence on the water. His younger sister, Jenna, matched that confidence with energy. She had been coming along on these trips since she was a teenager, often the one to suggest pushing farther offshore where the fish were bigger and the water darker. Today, she wore a baseball cap turned backward, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her grin flashing every time she glanced at the calm sea. A few early risers along the dock stopped to chat, leaning on railings as they sipped steaming coffee from paper cups. "Perfect weather for it," an older fisherman called out. Mark nodded back. "We'll be back tomorrow afternoon, might even bring you a tuna." Jenna waved, laughing, her voice carrying over the soft slap of water against the pilings. The departure felt almost leisurely. Mark eased the boat out of the slip, the diesel engine rumbling low. Jenna moved to the bow, one hand on the rail, when tossing strands of hair from under her cap. The Sea Glass slipped past the breakwater, where the ocean opened up in a wide, glittering expanse. The sun was still low enough to throw long, gold-tinted reflections across the water. Beyond the harbor, they picked up speed, the bow slicing through the swells as the shoreline shrank behind them. They passed the familiar markers, the rusted buoy that always leaned slightly to one side, the tall, skeletal shape of the old lighthouse. By mid-morning, land was just a faint smudge on the horizon, and it was replaced by the endless rise and fall of the sea. The plan was simple: head out to a known fishing spot 30 miles offshore, drop lines for mahi and yellowfin, and stay overnight. They'd done overnight trips before, sleeping in shifts, the other keeping watch under the vast dome of stars. The weather report promised nothing but calm seas for the next 48 hours, ideal conditions. As the hours passed, they settled into the quiet rhythm of fishing life. Jenna baited hooks with practiced speed, teasing Mark about how she'd catch the biggest fish again. He pretended to be offended, reminding her that last time he'd reeled in a marlin while she was still fighting with her tackle. Between their banter, the soundscape was pure ocean, water hissing along the hull, the occasional slap of a fish breaking the surface in the distance. By afternoon, the cooler held a modest haul, enough to make the trip already worthwhile. They planned to push farther out before nightfall, chasing rumors of bigger catches reported the week before. Jenna made sandwiches from the cooler, passing one to Mark at the helm. They ate with the sun sinking lower, the light turning the waves to sheets of liquid copper. As evening came on, the ocean's mood shifted subtly. The wind died almost completely, leaving the water glassy and still. The only movement came from the gentle roll of long, lazy swells. Mark switched on the running lights, their glow soft against the darkening sea. Far to the west, the horizon swallowed the last sliver of sun, and the sky deepened into velvet blue. Stars began to appear one by one, mirrored faintly in the water below. No one on shore knew it then, but that would be the last confirmed sighting of the Sea Glass and the siblings aboard. They were seen briefly on a distant vessel's radar around 9 p.m., still moving steadily farther offshore. After that, nothing, no distress call, no mayday, no hint of trouble. By morning, they would fail to check in as planned, and the calm, open water where they'd vanished would give up no answers. The first 24 hours after the siblings failed to check in were filled with rational explanations. Maybe they had decided to stay out an extra day, chasing a school of tuna. Maybe the radio had gone out. Boats came back late all the time, especially when the weather was this calm. But when the second night fell with no word, the unease became harder to ignore. By dawn on the third day, the harbor buzzed with talk. Too many people had seen them leave. Too many had noted the clear skies and steady conditions. This wasn't a case of being caught in a sudden storm. Something else had happened. The Coast Guard launched a search within hours. Helicopters swept low over the waves, scanning for the Sea Glass or any sign of debris. Patrol boats crisscrossed the siblings' intended route, stopping to question passing vessels. On the docks, their parents stood with hands clasped tightly together, eyes fixed on the horizon. Volunteers brought them coffee they didn't drink. Each time a Coast Guard boat returned, they straightened, only to slump again when the crews shook their heads. By the end of the first week, the search area had grown enormous, hundreds of square miles of open water. A cooler matching the one the siblings had carried was found bobbing in the swells 50 miles south, but it was impossible to tell how long it had been there or if it had drifted from their boat. 2 days later, a piece of tackle was recovered, its line severed, but it too could have belonged to anyone. Beyond that, the ocean offered nothing. No overturned hull, no life jackets, no flare residue in the air. The lack of answers made room for theories, and theories spread fast. Some locals whispered about rogue waves, towering walls of water that could appear from nowhere and swallow a vessel whole. Others wondered about pirates or smugglers, rare but not impossible in certain stretches of ocean. There were quieter suggestions too, spoken only in side conversations, that the siblings might have staged their disappearance, sailing somewhere far away to start over. Their family dismissed those ideas immediately. Mark had just invested in new electronics for the Sea Glass and had a mortgage on a small house near the marina. Jenna had started a new job at the local dive shop 2 months before. They had plans, birthdays, holidays, even a fishing trip already booked for the next season. Nothing pointed to them walking away. Months turned into years. The Coast Guard closed the case officially after 18 months, classifying it as missing, presumed lost at sea. The family refused to accept it. Every anniversary of their disappearance, they rented a charter and went out to the same waters, scanning the horizon as if the Sea Glass might appear at any moment. They sent requests to maritime authorities in other countries, asking them to log the boat's registration number in case it turned up. They even paid a private satellite service to review archived ocean imagery, searching for anything unusual. From time to time, they received tips, most of them false alarms. A white fishing boat with a green stripe spotted near the Bahamas. A vessel matching the Sea Glass seen in a blurry photo off the coast of Chile. Each lead ended the same way, not them. Still, the calls and emails kept coming, because stories like theirs didn't fade. They became part of local lore, mentioned alongside other mysteries of the sea. The community's memory of them lingered in small, stubborn ways. At the diner, their favorite corner booth remained unofficially theirs. Old friends kept a framed photo of the siblings on the wall of the bait shop, taken on a day when they'd brought in a record catch. Children growing up in town heard the story in bits and pieces, often exaggerated, but always ending with the same question: how could a boat just vanish? 7 years passed. The family learned to live around the absence, but they never stopped wondering. Then, on an otherwise ordinary morning, a call came from a maritime monitoring agency thousands of miles away. One of the siblings, old emergency satellite beacons, the kind built into the boat's safety equipment, had just pinged. The location: the middle of an empty stretch of ocean, far from shipping lanes, far from anything. The email came just after sunrise, buried in the middle of a string of routine spam and weather updates. It was from a maritime monitoring agency the family had worked with years ago, a name they hadn't seen in so long that at first they almost didn't open it. The subject line was simple: beacon activation, registration #SG-1983. The moment Mark and Jenna's father read those numbers, his breath caught in his throat. That was their emergency satellite beacon number. It hadn't transmitted a single signal in 7 years, not since the siblings had vanished. Within minutes, the phone calls began. First to the agency, then to the Coast Guard, then to the handful of old friends who had been part of the original search. The agency representative explained in a calm, clipped tone that the beacon had pinged just once, sending out a precise location before going silent again. The coordinates placed it deep in the central Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the coast where they had disappeared. No islands nearby, no major shipping routes, no known reason for anyone to be in that area. The location was unsettling for another reason: the beacon was designed to transmit immediately after being triggered, whether manually or upon submersion in water. If it had gone off now, after all these years, it meant one of two things: either it had been damaged and only recently repaired or surfaced, or someone had turned it on. The family's living room became a flurry of activity. Maps were spread across the table, laptops glowed with satellite views, and voices overlapped as possibilities were thrown into the air. Could the boat have been drifting all this time, carried by obscure currents? Could it have been taken, hidden, and now somehow set loose? The thought that the siblings might still be alive clawed its way into the room, but no one dared to say it outright for fear of shattering it. Authorities moved quickly but cautiously. The coordinates were relayed to multiple international agencies. Ships in the general vicinity, rare as they were contacted, but none reported seeing anything unusual. A satellite tasked with imaging the area was due to pass overhead in 48 hours. For now, the only thing anyone had was a string of numbers on a screen and the knowledge that the beacon had been in someone's possession, or at least on the sea glass, just days ago. Old instincts stirred in the search volunteers who had combed the waters years earlier. Some offered to go out again, even knowing the journey would be brutal, 2 weeks or more by ship to reach the coordinates. The cost and logistics were daunting, but the emotional pull was stronger. If the boat was out there, if there was even the slightest chance of survivors, they couldn't just wait for a blurry satellite photo. The family debated through the night. The risks were immense, the remoteness of the location, the unpredictability of the weather, the expense of chartering a vessel capable of the trip. Yet every argument for caution was drowned out by the image of that beacon lighting up, however briefly, after 7 long years of silence. In the end, they agreed, someone had to go. The following day, arrangements began for a private search expedition. Word spread quickly, drawing media attention. Reporters latched onto the story. Vanished fishing boat's emergency beacon suddenly activates years later. Speculation flourished in online forums. Some said the boat must have been held by criminals and then abandoned. Others spun wilder theories, hidden islands, secret government experiments, even alien involvement. For the family, it wasn't about theories. It was about the possibility that the siblings had left a clue, however small, and that it might still lead to answers. The thought of the sea glass sitting alone in the middle of the ocean was haunting, but it was also a lifeline. By the end of the week, a charter vessel was secured, and a crew of search specialists prepared for departure. As they loaded supplies, the family stood on the dock, holding the printed coordinates as if they were a map to something more than just a point in the ocean. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, was the first tangible sign of the siblings since the day they vanished, and no one knew what they would find when they reached it. The journey to the coordinates was grueling from the start. The search vessel, Mariner's Hope, was built for long voyages, but even it groaned under the strain of constant waves and shifting winds. Days turned into weeks, the horizon a never-ending circle of water that seemed determined to hide its secrets. The crew rotated in shifts, scanning the ocean with binoculars, checking sonar, and logging weather updates. Every evening, the sun dipped into the water in a blaze of color, and every morning, they woke to the same endless expanse of blue. The coordinates they had were as precise as possible, but the ocean was never still. Currents could push debris or vessels hundreds of miles off course. The closer they drew to the location, the more the tension on board thickened. The crew spoke in hushed tones. Some of them were hardened mariners, but even they admitted that the middle of this patch of ocean felt different. Empty, yet somehow watchful. On the 10th day, the sonar picked up something unusual, a large, solid mass below the surface, stationary but irregular in shape. At first, they thought it might be a rock formation or a piece of wreckage caught on the seabed. The captain ordered the vessel to circle slowly, lowering a camera rig into the water. The feed came through grainy but clear enough to make out part of a hull coated in barnacles, its paint stripped to dull gray. The curvature matched that of a medium-sized fishing vessel. The divers suited up immediately. Even before they hit the water, the air was heavy with anticipation. As they descended, the outline of the boat came into full view. It wasn't sunk, it was half submerged, tilting slightly, the stern dipping lower than the bow. The name on the side was almost completely obscured by years of marine growth, but enough letters were visible to make it out: Sea Glass. Climbing onto the deck was like stepping into a time capsule. The wooden planks were slick with algae, and ropes lay stiff with salt and age. The wheelhouse door was ajar, creaking faintly as the waves shifted the vessel. Inside, the air smelled of damp and decay. Papers were scattered across the floor, their ink blurred into illegible smudges. The radio sat silent, its casing corroded but intact. A mug still sat in a cup holder near the controls, fused to the surface by a crust of salt. In the galley, canned food sat stacked neatly in a corner, rust eating away at their labels. A fishing rod, line still threaded, leaned against a wall. It was as if the boat had been abandoned in the middle of a routine day and left to the ocean. Then they found the GPS device. It was small, waterproof, and resting on the chart table. The battery was long dead, but its presence felt deliberate, as though someone had placed it there before leaving. The divers sealed it in a protective case to bring back for analysis. The cabin was the last place they checked. It was cramped, with 2 bunks, a small desk, and a locked metal case bolted to the floor. The lock had corroded enough that it snapped with a single twist of a pry bar. Inside was a waterproof journal, its cover stiff but intact. The first few pages contained mundane fishing notes, dates, catch amounts, weather conditions. But toward the back, the handwriting grew hurried, almost frantic. The final entry was dated the day after the siblings had left port. Engine trouble, saw strange lights on the horizon last night. Decided to follow them. Not sure what they are, but they're moving. The rest of the pages were blank. When the divers surfaced, clutching the journal, the crew gathered in silence to read the entry. The sea around them seemed suddenly more vast, more unknowable. The sea glass had been found, but the siblings were still gone, their fate tied to a cryptic note and a signal that had traveled across years and miles to reach them. That night, anchored beside the drifting vessel, the search team took turns keeping watch. The ocean was calm, yet no one could shake the feeling that something was out there, moving, just beyond the edge of the lights. The journal sat on the galley table of the Mariner's Hope, its warped pages spread open beneath a lamp that swung with the motion of the sea. Salt crystals clung to the paper, glittering faintly under the light. Every crew member had read the final entry, and yet no one seemed willing to speak about it outright. The words were simple, but there was something in them, something that didn't sit right. Strange lights on the horizon, decided to follow them. It wasn't the kind of thing experienced mariners wrote unless they truly saw something unusual. By morning, the captain decided they couldn't leave the sea glass drifting. They towed it closer to their own vessel for safety and began a thorough inventory. Every drawer, every locker, every hidden compartment was searched. They found clothing neatly folded in duffel bags, personal effects like watches and family photos, but not a single sign of the siblings themselves. No life jackets were missing. No signs of struggle or panic. What troubled them most was the boat's logbook. Its official records were missing entirely. The only notes they had were from the personal journal, and those ended abruptly. Even stranger, the date of the final entry was followed by a blank page, and then, 7 torn-out sheets. It looked as though someone had deliberately removed them. While the crew worked, a technician began analyzing the GPS device they'd recovered. The battery was beyond repair, but its internal memory could still be accessed with the right equipment. After several hours of tinkering, the data finally appeared on the laptop screen. The coordinates showed the sea glass moving in a straight line far off any normal fishing route, heading toward deep, uncharted waters. The track ended abruptly in the exact spot where the beacon had been detected. There were no loops, no signs of drifting. It was as if the boat had gone directly to that point and stopped. That night, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain pounded the deck, and lightning flashed across the black ocean. The crew secured everything they could, but the sea glass rocked violently on its tow line, slamming into waves. Around midnight, one of the watch crew swore they saw a dim light far out on the water, low to the horizon. It wasn't a ship's running light or a buoy marker, it flickered in an irregular pattern, almost like it was pulsing. When he tried to show another crew member, it vanished. By morning, the storm had passed, but the ocean seemed eerily still. The captain decided they had to return to port with what they had: the journal, the GPS, and the vessel itself. But as they prepared to secure the sea glass for the long tow back, one of the divers made a disturbing discovery: a faint carving in the wood near the stern. It looked like numbers, etched hastily into the damp surface, almost invisible under the growth of barnacles. When they cleaned it, the numbers were revealed to be coordinates, different from the ones that had led them here. The new coordinates pointed even deeper into the ocean, toward a part of the map marked only with a vague notation: unsurveyed trench. The crew debated what to do. Some wanted to investigate immediately, fearing that if they left, they might never get another chance. Others felt an overwhelming unease, convinced that whatever had happened to the siblings had begun with following strange lights, and that going farther could lead them to the same fate. The captain, normally decisive, stood silent for a long moment before ordering the ship to turn toward the trench. They never made it there. A day into the journey, without warning, the GPS device stopped responding, and the faint satellite ping they'd been tracking vanished completely. It was as if the sea glass and everything connected to it had gone dark again. The crew decided to cut the tow line, letting the fishing vessel drift away into the vast blue. When they returned to port, the journal was turned over to authorities, and the story spread quickly. The official investigation stalled, citing lack of evidence. Unofficially, whispers grew, about lights at sea, about other ships gone missing in that part of the ocean, and about a trench no one had mapped in decades. Months later, a different fishing vessel reported seeing a lone boat drifting far offshore. Its name was unreadable under layers of barnacles, but the size and shape matched the sea glass. When they approached, the vessel turned slowly in the water, as though moved by something beneath, and slipped into a fog bank that hadn't been there moments before. When the fog cleared, the ocean was empty. The siblings' fate remained unknown, but to the crew of the Mariner's Hope, one truth lingered: some places in the ocean are not meant to be found.